Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
Is the marriage culture changing? Are married people being penalized for getting married? If you remarry, you generally cannot collect benefits on your former spouse's record unless your later marriage ends, whether by death, divorce, or annulment. I personally know older couples. They have either been divorced or their spouse has died. They find someone new, they fall in love, they want to get married, but if they do, they lose the benefits from their former spouse. And I read that you need to check your insurance policies to find out how you are affected. So what can we do about that, where we are making a God-honoring institution come under fire because the government doesn't want to give you your benefits? What do you think?
Well, I'll start because for one thing, even though you say it's God honored, marriage is actually a contract with the state. It is a state institution, which is the reason why I'm married and I did not get married in a church. I got married by, at the time, he was a Superior Court judge. He was our brother-in-law. And he was sanctioned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And the reason why marriage is important is because of the protections, because of the tax benefits. Marriage strengthens families, which is the reason why I'm proud to say that even though I'm always going to be a Chicago girl, I am proud to say that I live in the state that was first in making marriage equality legal, because people who had lived together as spouses, as partners, as companions could not legally get married because of they were the same gender. And what happened then if one got sick, you could not visit them or in the hospital. And this is especially came true during the AIDS crisis. And also there were other protections in your inheritance. Marriage is a contract with the state, and the state cannot penalize people because they want to marry again. If you have Social Security through your spouse, older people can't, a lot of them who are already living on the edge of poverty cannot afford to lose that. So we are forced to have people live what many of them may consider in sin because of this. And I think that this is the marriage penalty that we need to start addressing, because if you want to have the protections from the state and those tax protections on those tax benefits, you shouldn't be penalized for wanting to marry someone that you're in love with.
Well, I've had a chance to really examine a lot of concepts over the last 13 years because, of course, I was legally married to my husband of 20 years. And I understand the legal rights that come with marriage. When it came down to a point where in his illness, we made the decision that, once he transitioned or once his heart stopped, basically, he said he did not want to be resuscitated. He said, when I'm gone, let me go. Don't keep bringing me back, And so I was the only one who could legally sign the document that said, do not resuscitate, not his children, not a girlfriend.
Right.
You have to be a legal spouse to make that life and death decision. So I had a lot of respect for the institution of marriage. But as you say, it is a contract with the state, and it has to do with who is legally going to be responsible for the remains of the person. So being that is the case, I think when it comes to the whole marriage equality situation and how people were feeling, they were feeling like they didn't have the legal rights, but they also were feeling like they didn't have the social acceptance because a lot of churches wouldn't perform marriages. So a lot of that got me really thinking. And of course, as you know, I wrote a very controversial book, The Female Solution, which has to do with giving people an option to follow a different culture when it comes to marriage, plural marriages, it's been called, to handle some situations that I saw in my time as a teacher. I saw so many families where there were single mothers raising children, and I saw so many families where they were broken because there was upset over that they found out the man had another woman and children somewhere else. And I'm thinking, okay, everybody's mad at everybody, but the bottom line is this: the children that are suffering. And can we find a way to make it possible for marriageable people to be married, even if it means sharing a spouse? Well, that got a lot of response. And the whole idea that really got the most response had to do with people's thoughts about having sex. And that's really where the whole God sanctioned or God approved idea came from. And that's a lot of why people who are same sex were feeling like, well, we want to have our union honored in the spiritual house of worship to show that God is not disapproving of us. We don't want to just have a civil union. We want a church ceremony. So I think we have to really think about, why do we need other people to decide that God approves of our love? Why are we feeling that we need that in the form of a religious ceremony? And number two, if the state will not give us the desired rights, can we do it another way? And it's another document. We've talked about this on my radio show, The Female Solution, which is named after the book. We talked about a marriage contract in which you basically give this person a legal document, you sign it and everything, notarize it, and it's a legal contract. It's like a partnership contract, which gives them certain rights, healthcare right of attorney, or financial right of attorney and all those kind of things, inheritance rights. And so it's spelled out in a contract, so that even if you are not so-called legally married, you have a contract which gives you rights. And if that's what you have to do to keep your benefits from the government, that might also be a necessity. So, I've thought about a lot of things. The fact that we are judging people who we decide shouldn't be having sex with each other, and we're deciding that God doesn't approve of it, and then we're not giving them legal rights under the state to get married, so they lose their financial benefits. In both of those situations, we're really not honoring two people's right to be family. And in the past, that is who actually made a decision as to whether or not you can get together and be family, is your family. So I think we need to bring that power back to the family if there's going to be any governing body or any deciding body as to whether two people should be able to get together and love each other and form a family. It should be the family, not the government, and not a house of worship. That's my opinion.
That is a very interesting perspective, but I will tell you right off the bat, you are not going to get two Black women in a kitchen getting along and sharing the same husband. That is just the
I've actually visited families where that happened.
I don't care what you say. And I will
spectrum.
even give you an example of Sarah and Hagar. Here, God told Sarah and Abraham that they were going to have a son, and it was going to be through their line where the descendants that led to the promised Messiah were going to come from. Well, Sarah was a really old woman. She was quite up there. She was way past childbearing age, and so was Abraham. And Sarah said, well, why don't you take my maid, Hagar? She's young, she's beautiful, So then you have Ishmael that's born, but then there is this disruption in the family unit where now that Hagar is able to have children and Sarah isn't, Hagar is throwing it in her face. And Sarah is not wanting to put up with that. So she kicks her out and tells Abraham, I don't want to have anything to do with her. And Abraham really loves Hagar and his son by her, but you know, the Lord came to him and told him, your descendants that lead to this line are going to come from your own body. And he made him wait a number of years longer before that actually happened. But my point is, in that situation, and in many situations where there were many wives and one husband, those people did not get along, because I firmly believe that God, in his omniscience, chose one man, one woman to be husband and wife when he created Adam and Eve. And I know that is a controversial point for some people, but if you're going to do things the way you want, of course, you're going to have that battle. But if you're going to do the way things are presented according to scriptures, and we have so many long held examples that point out what happens when people go their own way, you have to make a decision. Am I going to do what I want and suffer the consequences, or am I going to obey what God has set down as a standard? And you see, even from people who get married and divorced and remarried, there is such conflict, even in blended families. And not saying that those things are anyone's fault, but they're hard things. Those are the consequences that come from going outside what was designated in the beginning. And, you know, I'm not blaming anybody. I have friends who live together because they get benefits from not getting married. And I think that it's shameful that I feel the state does penalize people who want to be married, who want to be deserving of the benefits that they get from a formal spouse. But if you get remarried, you get those things cut off. And then, like what Cheryl said, what are you supposed to do then?
Well, this is interesting because I I read the Bible. I don't necessarily subscribe to everything that's in it because it's been interpreted, reinterpreted, and people have put their own taint on things. So I'm not saying that this is definitely the word of God and every single thing that we have uh, learned through King James's interpretation is correct. Because in this sense, I'm not worried about whether or not God, what someone said that God said, because I know how the telephone game works. And, you're talking about thousands of years. And so we know that there's a lot of things that King James left out of the Bible just because he didn't believe in it. He didn't believe that the people should rise up if against the king. So he took that part out of the Bible. So, so once you realize that there's a lot of things that are just untrue, you can't, and what I'm saying is that there is a separation of church and state for a reason. And the reason is your religion and your religion and my religion should not color how everybody else lives. And marriage is a contract with the state. It is a contract with the state. And yes, the contract, Naima, that you're talking about, that's exactly what the contract says. That's why, there are some states where they have community property laws. There's some, even if I hadn't, because I bought my house before I got married, even if I hadn't added my husband's name to the deed, if I died before I had done that, as his legal spouse, he would get everything anyway. As my spouse, he would still get everything. Even what we have in our wills divides things because we also have a child. But the thing is that that's one thing that the state will give you. Now, if you have someone, that's why they now have domestic partnership. The thing is what happened before marriage equality, which is now the law of the land, is that people were hung up on the word. Well, let's just call it something else. Why do you have to call it something else? Marriage is not
A
those.
bad word.
It's a word. It's not a word that just belongs to Christianity
No,
just to Islam,
every
or just to those who, or just to Catholicism. For one thing, marriage is a sacrament in the Catholic Church. It is not a sacrament in the Methodist Church. We have three sacraments. Marriage isn't one of them, because marriage is a contract with the state. And we need to start thinking about how we can strengthen our family ties, and how we can keep from penalizing those who either want to get married or choose not to for whatever reason. Like you said, there are some times when if you're a single person, you will get benefits, where if you marry, you don't get those. And remember that old movie Claudine, where they were saying, oh yeah, he can live here, but if he's married, if you're married, he doesn't get, you don't get all this stuff. So they would prefer, especially for single people, to not get married. So
which is why I'm asking, is the government penalizing the marriage culture
Well, there's
by
two
having
things.
these kind of laws?
There's two things that you have to look at. What's the economic intention behind the decisions that are made? And we all know what happened with the welfare system. It just so happened only Black women were given the stipulation that they could not get government benefits if they had a man
A
in the
husband
house, had
in
a
the
husband
home.
in the home. Other ethnic groups, the families got the benefits, even if the husband was out of work, whatever the case may be. But
Isn't that
nobody else was
interesting?
made to throw their husband out except us. And so that has to do with the deliberate destabilization of the families. So that is one of the reasons why right now you have couples where they need the benefits. They need maybe the government health benefits. They need the financial benefits. And maybe the husband doesn't have the amount of money on a job that the government would pay a single mother who needed help. So the couple chooses to stay together unmarried so that they can survive financially. That's one of the things that we're seeing happen in our culture. Now, in terms of the whole multiple wife situation, just want to throw a little history out there. This is a widely accepted cultural practices in many parts of Africa. So when the Christian missionaries came and told them, you can't do this anymore because God said you can only have one wife. Now, this was a way that families dealt with things like, overabundance of widows and orphans after a war, and there needed to be, husbands for the women who had children. And so when that decree was made and people were forced to change their cultural practice, then they ended up with a lot of the same issues of poverty and single motherhood that we have here. Because the whole thing, again, was to destabilize the families. And what happens when your family's destabilized, your economy's destabilized, and then you're easier to control. So we see that this is what happened here. We see that's what's happened there. The thing
How are we going to rectify that for the people here and now?
That's the whole thing. When it comes down to making decisions about marriage and couples and living together and being officially married, we really have to remove the whole judgment as to this is godly and this is ungodly, because we basically end up, as you said, dealing with something that is a contract with the state. And that is what's determining your financial benefits.
In fact, Utah, in order to join the union, had to denounce plural marriage,
right,
because they're Mormons. And so, of course, anybody who's watched Sister Wives, I don't watch that stuff, but they have also kind of bastardized, I guess you could say, that whole thing with the Sister Wives, because what happens is that they have older men who exploit these young girls. They chase off the young men, and then they have all these wives, and then they have the wives and the children, but the state is but they're applying for welfare because those aren't legal marriages. But really, when Mormons decided that they wanted to have this, that what happened is that the country stepped in and says, well, no, this is illegal. This is, this is against God or whatever. So in order for you to join our country, you have to denounce that. And that was religion. Now, personally, I I would not want
Another
a
wife in
sister
the
wife.
home.
I do not want our house is enough. Would
I
I
told
like
you
a
black
wife?
women ain't standing for that.
Well, you know,
Would I like a wife who's going to do the stuff that I don't want to do? Sure. But
and you know what?
A robot
I've been
sport.
in families. I've been in families. I've been in
Children.
families where that's the case. You have one that might be the career woman, the other that's doing the housework, and it works out fine because the one is doing a career, she ain't trying to do the housework, and the one is doing the housework, she don't want to do the career. So I think it's a matter of if you agree. And that's really what everything should be. It should be about if you agree. Nothing is forced. I don't think the government should tell you you should or shouldn't or can or can't do it. I think it's a family decision. It's the decision that the adults should have the power to make. Now, in the years when the book first came out and I was doing a book tour and talking to people, what I found was the issue that always came up. Women would be basically saying, I don't want no other woman having sex with my husband. And it really all came down to that. And they would quote the Bible and God and everything else, but it really had to do with you're worrying about somebody else having sex. And I think the whole focus
yeah, but they're
on
having
the
sex with your
sex thing,
spouse.
what is that?
But they're having sex with your spouse. Yeah, I would worry about that too.
Yeah, and then the issue that came up with men was that, well, you women are saying that, but most of these men are out here cheating, doing it anyway, which is really bad because it's like, well, why are you marrying if you're not being, if you made a vow to be
honorable,
just don't marry. So,
right.
so back to our original question, do we have a culture of non-marriage? And a lot of people are just deciding, well, look, since I'm not going to be faithful, I'll just stay single. Or because the government isn't going to allow me to have the financial benefits that I need, and I want to have a relationship, I'll just stay single, but I'm going to have a relationship. So that's kind of what has evolved. And I think if we're going to make families stable, maybe we need to honor people who have families and not decide that either the church or the government should have the right to decide whether or not somebody is a family.
Yes.
That's my thought. So, well, what do you all think? Do you think that we need to redefine marriage? Do we need to redefine family? Do we need to have other ways that we recognize when people are a family? Should we honor the living together life partner relationships where there are no papers involved, but people just cohabitate? And should we remove the stigma of children born to a couple that is not legally married?
Yes.
What do you think? Well, you can let us know.
Comment.
Leave your comments. And we thank you all for watching us today. I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara. We are 3 Black moms.